United States. Now, I got to be honest. A couple months ago, I wasn't necessarily sure that the day before the last full day of the campaign, we'd be in the great state of New Hampshire. But I think that it suggests that what we're doing is expanding the map. We're bringing new voters into this coalition, and for the folks in New Hampshire who want to live free, we are the only ticket in town. Donald J. Trump is the only president for you. Now, people forget in 2016, New Hampshire was decided by 0.37%. That was the difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald J. Trump. And I think what's different this time around is that we have seen for the last 4 years the incredible failures of Kamala Harris's governance and the way that it has affected people in this great state as much as anybody else in the union. I've heard already, since I've been in the state of New Hampshire, about the terrible toll of Kamala Harris's open border, about the migrant crisis that has made its way hundreds of miles from the American southern border right here to the state of New Hampshire. I hear from New Hampshire families who can't afford the cost of groceries, who can't afford to buy a home. And I think our message in just 2 days to Kamala Harris is going to be very simple, and my running mate loves to say it. You are fired. Go back to San Francisco where you belong. We don't want you in the White House. Now, here's the thing. I will say, a couple days ago, I was in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we had a great event there in Las Vegas. One of the guys who worked for me won like $8,000 at the slot machine. I was like, you need to donate that to the campaign because we got to win, my man. But I saw Governor Tim Walz on the tarmac because we both – I know. And I know we have a lot of folks who are the praying type in this room, and we're thrilled, of course, to have all people of faith on. That's right, Jesus is King, and we're proud to say it. But if you are the praying type, and if you're not, that's okay. But if you are the praying type like me, please say a prayer for Governor Tim Walz, because I think he needs it. Because, think about this. Governor Tim Walz, in some ways, he's got the hardest job in politics. I even think maybe he's got the hardest job in the country. Think about this. After a long day of work, your hands hurt, your back's tired, you're exhausted, maybe you worked a little overtime. And by the way, Donald Trump's going to take away tax on overtime. It's one of the things we're going to do. But think about this. You're having a tough day at work. Just remember that nobody except for Tim Walz has to go out there and try to convince the American people that Kamala Harris is the United States. You may have a tough job, but that is the toughest job, certainly in American politics, and I think, again, maybe the toughest job in the United States. Think about what Kamala Harris has done. Think about what Tim Walz has to go out there and do. He's got to try to persuade people in this state, people all over the United States of America, that somehow Kamala Harris is going to fix what Kamala Harris already broke. That all these slogans that she issues when she's standing behind a teleprompter, that somehow Kamala Harris is going to do something in the next 4 years that she hasn't already done over her current 4 years in office. And that's tough work. The record of Kamala Harris is that New Hampshire families can't afford groceries, can't afford rent, can't afford to buy a house. The record of Kamala Harris is that the American southern border is wide open. The record of Kamala Harris is that this state has seen a massive flood of illegal migrant activity and certainly a massive increase in fentanyl and terrible overdose deaths that come along with it. The record of Kamala Harris is that the world is on fire and in a state of chaos. And Kamala Harris has the audacity to go around and pretend that she is going to be the candidate of change, even though that she is the sitting vice president of the United States. And, you know, I've never seen a politician that shameless who can stand before the American people and say, on day one, we're going to fix the affordability crisis, or on day one, we're going to secure that southern border. She got religion about border security about 3 months ago, just around the time that she became the Democrat nominee for president. I think any of us who are listening to Kamala Harris promise to do a lot on day one are thinking to ourselves, Kamala, day one was 1,400 days ago. What the hell have you been doing the whole time? Stop talking about doing your job and go and do it. You know, inflation under Kamala Harris's policies have cost the average New Hampshire family about $30,000. $30,000 just to afford what New Hampshire families could have afforded 3.5 years ago when Donald Trump left office. We've got gas prices in New Hampshire are up 37%. Our fellow citizens' credit card delinquencies are over 9%, which means about 1 in 10 of our fellow citizens can't afford to pay their bills. And just a couple of days ago, the jobs report, while Kamala Harris runs around the country talking about how the economy is doing good, the jobs report just a couple days ago said that the American economy lost 28,000 jobs in the private sector. But we created a lot of jobs for government bureaucrats. We lost 46,000 jobs in the manufacturing sector, but we created a lot of good jobs for Kamala Harris's government buddies. And I think that, you know, since Kamala Harris and her economy, she likes to see a lot of Americans lose their jobs. I think the only American that needs to lose her job is Kamala Harris, and that's exactly what's going to happen in 2 days. And it's, you know, it's unfortunately, and it's hard to even believe this is true, but it's not just fentanyl that's being trafficked across the southern border. As you all know, it's fentanyl that's being trafficked across the northern border too. The amount of fentanyl coming in across our northern border has more than doubled under the leadership of Kamala Harris. And a lot of you know my story. You know that it's frankly a miracle that I'm standing up here asking to be your next vice president of the United States. I grew up in a poor family. It's a great testament to the grace of God, but also to the generosity of the American people that I'm standing up here. But thank you, ma'am, because of how I grew up and because my grandmother raised me, because my mom struggled with opioid addiction, I know what it's like for families who are dealing with addiction. And by the way, my mom, she's coming up this January, will make 10 years clean and sober for my mother. I'm proud of her, and I love her. But you know, the reason why we got that second chance with my mom, I really believe, is because, thankfully, when she finally got clean 10 years ago, the poison that's coming across our border today, thank God, was not coming across the border 15 years ago. Wasn't coming across the border 10 years ago. Because I know when you look at the number of our citizens who are dying of overdose deaths, think of all the second chances that have been taken away from American families. Think about all the people, and it breaks my heart, who have been deprived of the second chance that we got with my mother. And I think that if we want to give more of our fellow citizens second chances, and we do, we have got to do the job that Kamala Harris refuses. We got to close down that border and go to war against the drug cartels. I know in the great state of New Hampshire, you guys don't like to pay taxes, and I appreciate that because I don't like to pay taxes either. You guys don't have an income tax. But it's funny, you think of 4 years under Kamala Harris, she has sent the IRS bureaucrats to the tune of 87,000 new IRS agents to wage war on American citizens, on small businesses, and on working people. And I happen to think that we ought to have a president who wages war against the Mexican drug cartels and leaves you the hell alone. The scale of Kamala Harris's border crisis is difficult to fathom, and it's one of the main drivers, by the way, of the increase in the cost of housing. You're going to have skyrocketing housing costs when you have American homes go not to American citizens, but thanks to Kamala Harris, to people who don't even have the legal right to be here. She's rolling out the red carpet for them, ladies and gentlemen. New Hampshire schools overcrowded with children who don't even speak English, which deprives our kids of a good education. New Hampshire hospitals overwhelmed. Emergency room wait times have skyrocketed because we've got people in this state who do not have the legal right to be here. And I believe that we are compassionate people, and we are always going to be a compassionate country. But the compassion of the American president belongs with the American people who have the right to be here, not with folks who came here illegally. So while Kamala Harris wants to roll out the red carpet for illegal aliens, while Kamala Harris wants to give them Social Security and Medicare benefits paid for by American taxpayers, you know, President Trump and I have a different message. Pack your bags. In 3 months, you're going back home. You know, the one thing I'll say about Kamala Harris, and I feel bad, I've just criticized Kamala Harris for about 15 minutes, and I should be a little more bipartisan. Come on. I'm going to be nice to Kamala Harris because, look, there is one thing that I'll say that Kamala Harris does very well, and it's very simple. Every time I'm not listening to you, I don't want to get in trouble with the media, I'm not even hearing what you're saying. La, 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 la. The thing that Kamala Harris does well is that every time she gives an interview, I think we gain about 100,000 votes for me and President Trump. That's the thing she does well. Y'all are going to get me in trouble. I come to New Hampshire, you guys are going to get me in trouble. I'm having too much fun. But think about this. The whole narrative of Kamala's campaign is that she somehow is going to be radically different from Joe Biden. When she's got a teleprompter in front of her, she'll say all these great things that she wants to do for the American people. And then you realize, well, if she wants to do these great things, why doesn't she just go ahead and do them? She's the sitting vice president. And you hear these proposals, a lot of them copied from us, by the way. I mean, to the extent that her campaign has got any policy proposals that make an ounce of sense, they're basically copied and pasted from Donald J. Trump's website. I told him a few weeks ago, I said, sir, she's going to show up one of these days in a red MAGA hat and a Navy suit, a long red tie, because she doesn't have any ideas of her own. But, you know, I think because of that, even though she tries to say, and her media allies try to claim that somehow she's going to do something different than we've done the last 4 years, we know that's just not true. And you know how we know it's not true? Because Kamala Harris herself occasionally will answer questions without the help of a teleprompter. And so let me tell you this. She did an interview with The View a couple weeks ago. Did you all see this interview? Well, okay, here's the thing. You're never going to hear me complain about this job. It is the honor of a lifetime to be able to run and be your vice presidential nominee and hopefully your next vice president. So, where is the open bar? You guys are, this is a good crowd. But, so you will never hear me complain about running for vice president save this one time, because here's the sacrifice that I do for all of you. I watch Kamala Harris on The View so that you don't have to. And I don't want that to change. For the next 2 days, I need you as sharp as possible, and you watch that interview, and I'm telling you, you're going to lose about 20 IQ points. So if you want to watch it, wait until the election's over, because we got to make sure you're, doing everything we can to turn out the vote and get people to the polls. But here's the thing. So she gives this interview, and they ask her, what would you have done differently over the last 4 years? And she says, nothing comes to mind. She's telling you that she's not going to do anything differently. All the policies that raise the price of groceries, the trillions of dollars of new spending where Kamala Harris actually cast the tie-breaking vote, the wide-open southern border, the chaos all over the world, Kamala Harris is telling you that she's going to do things exactly the same over the next 4 years as she has over the last 4 years. And I happen to think the state of New Hampshire and the people of our country, we need change. We need common sense. We need Donald J. Trump back in the White House, not more of the same broken policies. So let's just compare the policies, the proposals of Kamala Harris. When she's not copying from us, what is she actually saying that she wants to do for the people of New Hampshire? Well, number one, she's bragging. She's bragging that she wants to raise your taxes. She's going around saying that the Trump tax cuts that put more money in your pocket to the tune of thousands of dollars per family, she wants to get rid of those things and raise your taxes. We already know she wants to sick 87,000 IRS bureaucrats after the people of New Hampshire, and she's going to double down on those policies. She's telling us she is. Meanwhile, Donald J. Trump, you know what he thinks? He thinks you ought to keep more of your hard-earned money. Which is why he said we're not going to tax overtime, we're going to stop taxing Social Security, and we're going to let the American people keep more of their hard-earned money. You know, I grew up in a place that's cold, not as cold as New Hampshire. I'll tell you, I got off the plane today and I looked at my wife. By the way, isn't my wife beautiful? Thank you, honey, for campaigning with me. She's my best friend, and it's great to go around the country and get to do this with your best friend by your side. But I get off the plane and I say, honey, it is cold out here. And then we're driving, and like 5 minutes, 5 minutes after we get in the car as we're driving here, I see like a 3-year-old in T-shirts and shorts. And I'm like, the people in New Hampshire are tougher than I am. But, because I grew up in a family where we often struggled with money, and because I grew up in a place that does often get very cold in the winter, there were times when my mamaw, the woman who raised me, would sometimes say, look, we don't have the money to turn on the heat tonight. We're going to throw a few extra blankets on the bed, and that's how we dealt with a cold winter night. Now, Donald J. Trump and I believe that in this country, we are bountiful and prosperous enough where every American family, so long as they work hard and play by the rules, they ought to be able to turn their heat on in the middle of a cold winter night. And that's why one of the most important comparisons between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is Kamala Harris wants to buy oil and gas from tin-pot dictators all over the world. Donald J. Trump and I want to drill, baby, drill. We got plenty of it right here. Let's get it out of the ground with our own people. And speaking of cold, I know we've got some folks. We've obviously got an incredible crowd in here. I know we got some folks outside who couldn't get in. I believe they can hear us because we put some speakers out there. We just want to tell you, we love you all. We're grateful that you came, and get out there and vote on Tuesday. And let's just talk about the stakes. Look, we talked about the stakes in this election. Let's talk about how important it is to get out there and vote, because The only way that we're going to switch out the corrupt leadership in Washington with a president who is fit to lead this great nation is if we get out there and vote. And so I'm going to make a request of every single person in this room, but also those who are listening outside. I want all of you to get out there and vote 10 times. This guy up here, he's like, this is not a Kamala Harris event. We only vote once here. We do it the legal way. Here is how we're going to vote 10 times the legal way. I want you to get yourself to the polls on Tuesday, and I want you to take 9 of your friends and family with you. That's how we vote 10 times. Because I think the biggest difference between Kamala Harris and Donald J. Trump, it's not actually just the public policy. There are so many issues where Kamala Harris has doubled down on bad policies that make life unaffordable and make the American dream less accessible. But with all those policy disagreements, I actually think the biggest difference between Kamala Harris and Donald J. Trump is that Kamala Harris, instead of trying to persuade all of you, instead of trying to claim that she's the right candidate, she's spending these last few days on the campaign trail, her and all of her buddies at the leadership levels of the Democratic Party, and they're basically attacking their fellow citizens. We saw this when Joe Biden, Kamala Harris's boss, called half of America garbage for thinking that Joe Biden, Kamala Harris did a bad job. You see this when Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's running mate, calls people fascists for showing up at a patriotic rally where we celebrate this country and talk about changing its leadership. You see this when Kamala Harris and all of her surrogates call people racist for believing that America ought to have a southern border. And here's my message to all of our fellow Americans. We know you're struggling, and we know that you deserve better leadership. But I will never, and Donald J. Trump will never, call our fellow citizens garbage. We are not garbage for thinking Kamala Harris has done a bad job. But while we're not garbage for thinking that Kamala Harris has done a bad job, I think in a couple days the voters of New Hampshire are going to take out the trash in Washington, D.C., and that person's name is Kamala Harris. So let me leave you all with one final thought, because, you know, in the midst of a tough campaign season, it's very easy to get, you know, red team versus blue team, right? Red shirt versus blue shirt, Republicans versus Democrats. Remember, we got a lot of Democrats and a lot of independents who have joined this common sense movement. We're thrilled to have them. They're welcome. And you know, earlier today I was with Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia and Governor Doug Burgum of North Dakota, great patriots. And in the last couple of weeks I've been with folks on the left like Bobby Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard. We got a lot of folks from across the spectrum. But what we're really after is not just beating Kamala Harris. As fun as it's going to be to beat Kamala Harris, trust me, I'm going to enjoy it more than any person in this room. But we got to ask ourselves, why are we going to work hard over the next couple of days? Why are we going to work to beat Kamala Harris? And the simple answer is because the American people deserve leadership that actually cares about them. Think about this. I've talked to veterans in the last couple of weeks who are so excited about voting for Donald J. Trump because they saw a generation of their buddies maimed and wounded by corrupt leadership using our troops as the policemen of the world. Donald J. Trump and I believe we got to use America's troops for America's national security, not anybody else's. And you know, especially to the Democrats out there, but to the independents, remember how insulting the national Democrat leadership has been to the state of New Hampshire. Because here's what Donald J. Trump has said, and I'm happy to echo that promise, that we believe, first of all, in democracy. We believe that you ought to vote for the people who serve as your nominee, not have them installed like Kamala Harris did. But we also believe that the first in the nation presidential primary ought to stay in New Hampshire because the people in New Hampshire have got some real wisdom. But my friends, again, my last thought here is that our citizens deserve so much better than what they've gotten from Kamala Harris over the last 3.5 years. You know, I met a woman not too long ago who told me, she was a retiree, told me that for 40 years she and her husband had done steak night every Friday. That was their special little ritual. But last year they stopped doing steak night because Kamala Harris, her policies had made grocery prices so unaffordable that they couldn't afford to do steak night. I've talked to a lot of moms and dads over the last few weeks, parents who lost children to fentanyl overdoses because their kids do what a lot of teenagers do. They took something under peer pressure at a party, and instead of, in past years, a teenager making a mistake would wake up with a headache or with a lecture from their parents, they're paying for that mistake with their lives because of what Kamala Harris has led into this country. I've talked to people who love this country, who serve this country, but want their service to be respected and rewarded and not insulted by people like Kamala Harris. I've talked to the families of the 13 brave Americans who were killed in Afghanistan a little over 3 years ago, and you know what? They're heartbroken that they lost their loved ones, but they're not mad. What they're really mad about is the lack of accountability that has come from Kamala Harris's administration. That's what makes them mad. And I think about all these people who have lost loved ones, people who are worried about buying a house or affording groceries, people who just want to raise their children or their grandchildren in safety and security and prosperity. And I think to myself, we've got the best country in the world. We've got the best people anywhere in the world. The only thing that is broken about the United States of America is Kamala Harris's broken leadership. In 2 days, let's go change that. Donald J. Trump for president. God bless you, New Hampshire. Thank you for having me.